again, YouTube family. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of my channel. This is going to be a little bit different. This episode I'm recording for the 4th of July. Still got my 4th of July background going. And as everybody is going to celebrate in some way or another across this country, I've got a picture here up of fireworks at the Las Vegas Strip. I'm in Las Vegas. People will celebrate around the country the way they do, however you plan to celebrate. And I am just focusing this episode on the 4th of July. And in this illustration, it's of the Continental Congress when they put together the Declaration of Independence to assert their independence from the king in England, and obviously led to the Revolutionary War and to the creation of the United States of America. Some of the odd bits of trivia: the Declaration of Independence was mostly written by Thomas Jefferson. John Adams believed that July 2nd was the day that should have been celebrated for America's independence, and ended up being July 4th. July 4th, the delegates agreed to the Declaration of Independence, although a number of the personnel did not actually sign the Declaration of Independence until August. I believe August 12th was when they got together to do the final signing of the document. So you have John Adams, who actually had written a letter to his wife, saying that July 2nd was going to be celebrated henceforth as the day the country was born. And it ended up being 2 days later when they held a vote that people agreed to, and I believe the document was submitted on the 2nd. But that's the way it happened, Back in that time period, it wasn't so easy to travel into Washington, or into, I guess in this case, Philadelphia, to make votes happen. At this time, they were colonies of England. And one of the things that I came across in reading about the 4th of July, just to read up on the holiday that's coming up, is that one of the traditions that used to exist in America, one of the ways people celebrated the 4th of July, was with a public reading of the Declaration of Independence, the document where we declared our independence from England. And so on this episode of my channel, I was going to do just that, a public reading of the Declaration of Independence. And here is an image of the Declaration of Independence. As you can see, there's the different sections. The Declaration of Independence is basically broken down into the introduction, the preamble, the indictment, which is a bill of particulars documenting the king's repeated injuries and usurpations of the Americans' rights and liberties, the failed warnings, the denunciation, the conclusion, and then at the bottom, the signatures. And so I thought on this 4th of July, I would celebrate it with a public reading of the Declaration of Independence, a simple way to celebrate the 4th of July in a way that has previously been done before. It's part of our history. It's something we used to do, is to recite the Declaration of Independence, and I doubt there are very many people in this country that could quote a line out of the Declaration of Independence, and so it may not be that bad to revisit it, the document that led to the creation of this country. Hopefully I can get through all these words with without too much difficulty, and here is the way it's broken down with the preamble, the grievances, the resolution, then the signatures at the bottom. I believe I meant to put that up before, and I did not. Sorry about that. But, this is an image of the Declaration of Independence, so without further ado, I'm going to try and read through this without too many mistakes, without too many errors, and without too much dry mouth. So in the introduction, you have the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. The preamble as follows: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that the governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shewn that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And for the indictment part, it reads as follows: such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To provide this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained, and when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend them. He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only. He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records, for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures. He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness of his invasions of the rights of the people. He has refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all of the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within. He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands. He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amount and payment of their salaries. He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance. He has kept among us, in times of peace, standing armies without consent of our legislatures. He has affected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power. He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation, for quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states, for cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us, in many cases, of the benefit of trial by jury, for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies, for taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our government, for suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever. He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. He is at this time transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation. He has constrained our fellow citizens, taken captive on the high seas, to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands. He has excited domestic insurrections among us, and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions we have petitioned for redress. In the most humble terms, our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren, We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us. We have reminded them of the circumstances of our immigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them to the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence. They too have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace friends. We therefore, the representatives of the United States of America and General Congress, assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And then at the end there is the signatures. And as you, I assume, picked up on, there was the part about the Native Americans. It's the founders of this country were deeply flawed. They just were. And, they claimed all men were created equally, yet they held slaves. They obviously were deeply flawed people. But they created a country, and they created a document, the Constitution, which allowed for evolution. It allowed for societal evolution because the document was created so that it could be amended over time. That's one of the reasons I have issues with the right-wing judges who do this originality thing where they try and interpret laws based on the original intent of the founders of this country or whatever they claim. And the founders of this country, to some degree, I believe, knew they were flawed. I believe they knew this country was flawed, and they created a system that we could change over time. They created a system because I assume they knew it would need to change over time. It would need to evolve. Everything evolves. The people that started this country, that wrote these documents, understood that things weren't static, that we learned more over time as time went on. I mean, they lived in a time when science existed. There was a time when there was no such thing as science. If you practiced science, you were believed to be practicing witchcraft. And they created a system, though they were flawed, that worked very well. They created a system that could evolve politically, that could evolve socially, and eventually could get beyond the constraints of the time of the people that created it. You know, I'm not trying to make any massive excuses for the framers of the country, for the framers of this document, for the framers of the Constitution. They were who they were. And, but they created a document that was a living document that could evolve over time as the nation evolved, as the nation grew, expanded, got more powerful, got more wealthy, and right now we have a system that unfortunately the people who have the wealth in this country, the ones who are making the decisions because they pay the politicians. But I've done plenty of videos about that stuff. And since one of the former traditions of the 4th of July was public recitations of the Declaration of Independence, I figured I would do that for my YouTube channel. And I think all of you who tune in, I know probably most people that have ever watched this channel are going to have some kind of family get-together on the 4th of July. And I hope the best for everyone for this 4th of July. I hope the best for our country as we move forward. And I would like to say thank you to all who have served, especially to all those who sacrificed everything on the mantle of liberty, who gave their lives in the service of the country. And I would like to thank all of those who continue the fight to make this country a better place, for all those who protest the current injustices that we see in this country, for those who take a knee to point out the fact that we have not reached that point yet. This country still has a ways to go. We have not reached the point of liberty and justice for all. We just haven't. And that's what I hope for on this 4th of July, is that we continue the evolution of democracy and liberty in this country, so that one day it will be a completely equitable place where everyone is entitled to the liberty and the justice of this country. You have those who stand in protest. You have those who kneel in protest. Peaceful protests. And what they're protesting against is the ongoing injustices. And the easy thing is to criticize them, to put unfair criticisms on them, when what they are doing is the courageous thing, which is standing up to the injustice. What they are doing is the patriotic thing, wanting this country to be a better place. Because if you oppose them, what you are wanting is for the evolution to stop. And this country was made to evolve. Our documents were made to evolve. The people who are doing these protests now, you have the Olympic athletes, you have people like Colin Kaepernick, who have risked their careers. They took their stand knowing they would be criticized, knowing they would be attacked, knowing people would try and dredge up anything they could to disparage and demonify these people. And nonetheless, they took the right stand. They took the stand for the evolution of America, for this country to be a better country, for it to be a better place, for eventually all of us to enjoy the liberty and justice for all concept. I would like to thank everybody who is doing their part. And thank you. I don't dislike anybody for ideology. I try to understand ideology. I don't try to understand why. I've told people before, I don't care what you believe. My only curiosity is why you believe what you believe. And that's part of what I'm doing with this channel. And going through social and political discourse to achieve that end, to try and understand more why people believe what they believe. But thanks for watching, and I wish all of you a very happy 4th of July weekend. Enjoy.